into Linderman was 3 miles. I back-tripped it 4 times a day, and on each forward trip carried 150 pounds. This means that over the worst trails, I daily traveled 24 miles, 12 of which were under a burden of 150 pounds. Yes, I had let career go hang, and was on the adventure path again in quest of fortune. And of course, on the adventure path, I met John Barleycorn. Here were the chesty men again, rovers and adventurers, and while they didn't mind a grub famine, whiskey they could not do without. Whiskey went over the trail, while the flour lay cached and untouched by the trailside. As good fortune would have it, the 3 men in my party were not drinkers. Therefore, I didn't drink save on rare occasions and disgracefully when with other men. In my personal medicine chest was a quart of whiskey. I never drew the cork till 6 months afterward, in a lonely camp, where, without anaesthetics, a doctor was compelled to operate on a man. The doctor and the patient emptied my bottle between them and then proceeded to the operation. Back in California a year later, recovering from scurvy, I found that my father was dead and that I was the head and the sole breadwinner of a household. When I state that I had passed coal on a steamship from Bering Sea to British Columbia and travelled in the steerage from there to San Francisco, it will be understood that I brought nothing back from the Klondike but my scurvy. Times were hard. Work of any sort was difficult to get, and work of any sort was what I had to take, for I was still an unskilled labourer. I had no thought of career. That was over and done with. I had to find food for 2 mouths besides my own and keep a roof over our heads. Yes, and buy a winter suit, my one suit being decidedly summery. I had to get some sort of work immediately. After that, when I had caught my breath, I might think about my future. Unskilled labour is the first to feel the slackness of hard times, and I had no trades save those of sailor and laundryman. With my new responsibilities, I didn't care to go to sea, and I failed to find a job at laundrying. I failed to find a job at anything. I had my name down in 5 employment bureau. I advertised in 3 newspapers. I sought out the few friends I knew who might be able to get me work, but they were either uninterested or unable to find anything for me. The situation was desperate. I pawned my watch, my bicycle, and a mackintosh of which my father had been very proud and which he had left to me. It was and is my sole legacy in this world. It had cost $15, and the pawnbroker let me have $2 on it. And, oh yes, a waterfront comrade of earlier years drifted along one day with a dress suit wrapped in newspapers. He could give no adequate explanation of how he had come to possess it, nor did I press for an explanation. I wanted the suit myself. No, not to wear. I traded him a lot of rubbish, which, being unpawnable, was useless to me. He peddled the rubbish for several dollars, while I pledged the dress suit with my pawnbroker for $5. And for all I knew, the pawnbroker still has the suit. I had never intended to redeem it. But I couldn't get any work. Yet I was a bargain in the labour market. I was 22 years old, weighed 165 pounds stripped, every pound of which was excellent for toil, and the last traces of my scurvy were vanishing before a treatment of potatoes chewed raw. I tackled every opening for employment. I tried to become a studio model, but there were too many fine-bodied young fellows out of jobs. I answered advertisements of elderly invalids in need of companions. And I almost became a sewing machine agent on commission without salary. But poor people don't buy sewing machines in hard times, so I was forced to forgo that employment. Of course, it must be remembered that along with such frivolous occupations, I was trying to get work as wop, lumper, and roustabout. But winter was coming on, and the surplus labour army was pouring into the cities. Also I, who had romped along carelessly through the countries of the world and the kingdom of the mind, was not a member of any union. I sought odd jobs. I worked days and half-days at anything I could get. I mowed lawns, trimmed hedges, took up carpets, beat them, and laid them again. Further, I took the civil service examinations for mail carrier and passed first. But alas, there was no vacancy, and I must wait. And while I waited, and in between the odd jobs I managed to procure, I started to earn $10 by writing a newspaper account of a voyage I had made, in an open boat down the Yukon of 1,900 miles in 19 days. I didn't know the first thing about the newspaper game, but I was confident I'd get $10 for my article. But I didn't. The first San Francisco newspaper to which I mailed it never acknowledged receipt of the manuscript, but held on to it. The longer it held on to it, the more certain I was that the thing was accepted. But here is the funny thing. Some are born to fortune, and some have fortune thrust upon them. But in my case, I was clubbed into fortune, and bitter necessity wielded the club. I had long since abandoned all thought of writing as a career. My honest intention in writing that article was to earn $10. And that was the limit of my intention. It would help to tide me along until I got steady employment. Had a vacancy occurred in the post office at that time, I should have jumped at it. But the vacancy did not occur, nor did a steady job. And I employed the time between odd jobs with writing a 21,000-word serial for the Youth's Companion. I turned it out and typed it in 7 days. I fancy that was what was the matter with it, for it came back. It took some time for it to go and come, and in the meantime I tried my hand at short stories. I sold one to the Overland Monthly for $5. The Black Cat gave me $40 for another. The Overland Monthly offered me $7.50, pay on publication, for all the stories I should deliver. I got my bicycle, my watch, and my father's Macintosh out of pawn and rented a typewriter. Also, I paid up the bills I owed to the several groceries that allowed me a small credit. I recall the Portuguese grocery man who never permitted my bill to go beyond $4. Hopkins, another grocer, could not be budged beyond $5. And just then came the call from the post office to go to work. It placed me in a most trying predicament. The $65 I could earn regularly every month was a terrible temptation.